The entire Lincoln Center fell into stunned silence as the fake pregnancy belly went flying across the marble floor, landing with a hollow thud in front of 500 of New York's most powerful elite. Camera flashes erupted like lightning as Veronica Sterling, the billionaire's mistress, stood frozen in humiliation, her elaborate deception exposed for the world to see. But this wasn't even the most shocking moment of the night. Just minutes earlier, Isabella Blackstone, 7 months pregnant and glowing with quiet fury, had stepped onto that same stage to destroy the man who thought he could discard her like yesterday's news. With FBI agents closing in and her husband's empire crumbling in real time, Isabella delivered the most devastating revenge in Manhattan society history. This is the story of how a betrayed pregnant wife brought down a $12 billion media empire with nothing but courage, intelligence, and the truth. It's a story of justice served ice cold and karma delivered in front of cameras that broadcast to millions worldwide. If you love stories of strong women who refuse to be victims, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of justice and revenge. Let's dive into this epic story of betrayal and triumph. The December snow fell silently against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, each flake catching the warm golden light from within like tiny diamonds. Isabella Romano Blackstone stood in the nursery she had spent months perfecting, her hand resting gently on her 7-month pregnant belly as she adjusted the mobile above the mahogany crib one final time. The room was a masterpiece of luxury and love. Hand-painted murals of fairy tales covered the walls. A crystal chandelier cast rainbow prisms across the ceiling, and shelves lined with the finest toys money could buy from every corner of the world. This was supposed to be their sanctuary, their future, their beginning. From the living room, she could hear the soft clink of crystal as Alexander poured himself another scotch, his third, since arriving home from what he claimed was another emergency board meeting. At 35, Alexander Blackstone commanded an empire worth $12 billion. Blackstone Media stretched from Hollywood studios to Wall Street financial networks, from luxury magazines to cutting-edge streaming platforms. Isabella had fallen in love with his brilliance first, then his ambition, and finally his tender moments when he thought no one was watching. She remembered their wedding day 2 years ago at the Plaza, 500 guests, a 10-tier cake, and Alexander whispering in her ear as they danced, "You're going to be the mother of titans, my love." Now, at 28, Isabella felt like she was living in a dream. The penthouse sprawled across 2 floors of Manhattan's most exclusive building, with a private elevator, a rooftop infinity pool, and a wine cellar worth more than most people's homes. She had given up her architecture career at his gentle insistence, trading her hard hat and blueprints for charity galas and prenatal yoga classes. "The baby will need you," Alexander had said, kissing her forehead. "And I need you to focus on our family." She had believed him completely. The sound of Alexander's phone buzzing cut through her reverie. From the nursery, she heard him answer with his business voice, crisp, authoritative, commanding. But there was something different tonight, something softer around the edges. "I know, sweetheart." His voice drifted down the hallway. "Tomorrow night, the Plaza, room 2012. Wear the red dress I bought you." Isabella's blood turned to ice. Sweetheart, red dress. Her hands instinctively tightened around her belly, as if protecting the child within from what she was hearing. She moved silently toward the living room, her bare feet making no sound on the Italian marble floors. Alexander stood with his back to her, one hand holding his scotch, the other gripping his phone with an intimacy she recognized the same way he used to hold the phone when he called her during their courtship. "I love you too, V. Tomorrow we'll tell the world about us." The crystal mobile from the nursery seemed to chime mockingly in the distance as Isabella's world crumbled around her. V. Veronica Sterling, Alexander's personal assistant, who had been around for 8 months coincidentally. Right around the time Isabella had announced her pregnancy, she thought of Veronica's perfect figure, her platinum blonde hair always styled flawlessly, her red-soled Louboutin heels clicking confidently through the Blackstone media offices. She thought of the way Veronica's hand would linger on Alexander's shoulder during meetings, how she always seemed to have an excuse to travel with him on business trips. Isabella retreated to the bedroom, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure it would wake the baby. She sat on the edge of their California king bed, the bed where Alexander had made love to her just this morning, whispering about their future together, and felt the first tears begin to fall. But tears would have to wait. Isabella Romano had been raised by a Harvard professor father and a Supreme Court lawyer mother. She had graduated summa cum laude from Harvard herself before meeting Alexander. She knew how to think under pressure. With trembling fingers, she reached for Alexander's iPad, left carelessly on his nightstand. His password had always been their anniversary date, June 15th. Her fingers hesitated over the screen. Did she really want to know the device unlocked with a soft chime? The evidence was overwhelming and devastating. Months of text messages between Alexander and V filled the screen. Photos of intimate dinners at restaurants Isabella had never been to. Hotel receipts for weekend getaways to the Hamptons, while Isabella thought Alexander was in California on business. But the worst were the recent messages. Alexander, Isabella is becoming impossible. All she talks about is the baby. You're my real future? V. V. When are you going to leave her? I'm tired of hiding. Alexander. After the baby is born, I'll get custody of Billionaire versus an unemployed pregnant woman. Easy win. Then we can be together properly. V. And what about tonight? She's just sitting at home like a cow. Alexander. Let her tomorrow at the charity gala. I'm introducing you as my partner. The whole world will know you're mine. Isabella's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the device. Partner. The charity gala was tomorrow, the annual Blackstone Foundation event at Lincoln Center, where Alexander donated millions to various causes in front of New York's elite. Isabella had been planning to attend, to stand by his side as his wife, proudly showing their unborn child to their friends and colleagues. Now she understood why he had been so insistent that she stay home. You need your rest, Bella, he had said just yesterday. The gala will be loud and overwhelming. Think of the baby. She scrolled through more messages, each one a dagger to her heart. Did you transfer the money to my account? Alexander, 50 million, as promised. Consider it an early wedding gift. V. Perfect. I've already put a down payment on that house in the Hamptons. Our house. Isabella felt bile rise in her throat. $50 million of their money that was supposed to secure their child's future had been transferred to his mistress. Their house in the Hamptons, where she had spent last summer planning the nursery's design, was being bought for another woman. The sound of Alexander's footsteps approaching the bedroom sent Isabella into a panic. She quickly closed the iPad and pretended to be adjusting her pillows, but her red-rimmed eyes and pale complexion betrayed her. Bella. Alexander's voice was smooth, concerned, loving the same voice that had been whispering sweet nothings to his mistress moments before. Are you feeling all right? You look pale. She looked up at the man she had loved completely, had trusted with her life and her future. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his green eyes warm with apparent concern, his 6'2" frame impeccable in his custom Armani suit. He looked like the perfect husband, the ideal father-to-be. I'm fine, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Just tired. Alexander sat on the edge of the bed and placed his hand on her belly. For a moment, Isabella felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe there was an explanation. How's our little prince doing tonight? He asked, and Isabella felt the baby kick in response to his father's touch. Prince? Isabella asked, trying to keep her voice steady. We don't know the gender yet. Alexander's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Just a feeling, he said quickly. Though honestly, I hope it's a boy, someone to carry on the Blackstone name properly. The casual cruelty of his words, the implication that she was merely a vessel for his heir, hit Isabella like a physical blow. She saw him now with new eyes, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes when he looked at her anymore. The way he checked his phone constantly, even during their most intimate moments. The way he spoke about their child as if it were a business acquisition. Alexander, she said, her voice steadier now. Can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. The same endearment he had used with Veronica. Are you happy with us, with this? She gestured to her belly, to the room around them, to the life they had built together. For a moment, his mask slipped entirely. She saw calculation in his eyes, annoyance, even disgust. But then the mask snapped back into place. Of course I'm happy. Bella, you're going to be the mother of my child. What more could I want? What more indeed? A woman who wasn't becoming impossible. A woman who talked about things other than babies. A woman like Veronica Sterling, with her red dress and her $50 million bank account. I love you, Isabella whispered, testing him, hoping against hope. Love you too, he replied automatically, already reaching for his phone as it buzzed with another message. His face lit up as he read it the same way it used to light up when she texted him. That night, Isabella lay awake listening to Alexander's steady breathing, her hand on her belly as the baby moved restlessly inside her. Tomorrow was the gala. Tomorrow, Alexander planned to humiliate her in front of 500 of New York's most influential people. Tomorrow, he would replace her with a woman who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. But Isabella Romano Blackstone was not just the daughter of Harvard intellectuals. She was not just a pregnant woman to be discarded when she became inconvenient, and she was certainly not going to go quietly into the night while her husband and his mistress built their future on the ashes of her heart. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, Isabella made a decision that would change everything. She thought of her unborn child, of the life they deserved, of the justice that needed to be served. Alexander and Veronica had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated her. They were about to discover just how dangerous that miscalculation would prove to be. The morning after Isabella's devastating discovery, Alexander left for the office early, claiming he needed to finalize details for the evening's gala. Isabella watched him go from the bedroom window, noting how he spent an extra few minutes styling his hair and checking his appearance in the hallway mirror before departing. Once his Bentley disappeared into Manhattan traffic, Isabella allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to cry. 5 minutes to mourn the death of her marriage, her trust, her dreams of the perfect family. Then she dried her tears, made herself a cup of decaffeinated coffee, and got to work. Isabella had always been methodical, a trait that had served her well in architecture and would serve her even better now. She started with Alexander's home office, a mahogany-paneled sanctuary he thought was completely private. Using skills she hadn't employed since her days on the Harvard debate team's research committee, she began documenting everything. The first revelation came within an hour, hidden in Alexander's desk drawer. Beneath insurance documents and business contracts, she found a burner phone. The message history told a story that made her stomach turn. The affair hadn't started 8 months ago when Veronica was hired. It had been going on for over a year. They had been planning Isabella's replacement since before she had even gotten pregnant. The wife is getting suspicious about our dinner meetings. Maybe we should cool it for a while. Alexander. Don't worry about Isabella. She's too trusting for her own good. Besides, once she's pregnant, she'll be too distracted to notice anything. You're really going to get her pregnant just to keep her busy. Alexander. It's perfect. She'll be fat and emotional for 9 months. Then too exhausted with the baby to pay attention to us. By the time she realizes what's happening, we'll be long gone with half the assets. Isabella's hand instinctively moved to her belly. Her pregnancy, the child she had wanted so desperately, the future she had dreamed of, had been nothing more than a strategic distraction to Alexander. A way to keep her occupied while he planned her betrayal. But the messages revealed something even more sinister. Alexander and Veronica hadn't just been planning to leave her. They had been planning to destroy her. Alexander. The prenup protects most of my assets, but she could still cause problems. We need her to look like an unfit mother. V, how do we do that? Alexander. Document everything. Her mood swings, her crying spells, her irrational behavior. Make it look like postpartum depression. With the right lawyers and the right evidence, I can get full custody and she'll be lucky to get supervised visitation. V, and if that doesn't work, Alexander. There are other ways to handle difficult situations. Don't worry about that. The casual way they discussed destroying her life, separating her from her child, made Isabella feel physically ill. But she forced herself to keep reading, to document every detail. If they wanted to play dirty, she would be ready. As she photographed the messages with her own phone, Isabella's mind drifted back to her college days. Most people knew her as the successful architect who had married Manhattan's most eligible bachelor. What they didn't know was that Isabella Romano had been one of Harvard's most talented investigative researchers. She had helped expose two major academic fraud cases and had been recruited by three different intelligence agencies before choosing architecture instead. It was time to dust off those skills. Isabella spent the next 6 hours conducting the most thorough investigation of her life. She found financial records showing that Alexander had been systematically moving assets into offshore accounts that Veronica could access. She discovered that the business trips to California had actually been romantic getaways to Napa Valley, charged to the company credit card as client entertainment expenses. Most damning of all, she found evidence that Alexander had been embezzling money from the Blackstone Foundation, the very charity that would be celebrated at tonight's gala. Over the past year, he had diverted nearly $100 million intended for children's hospitals and educational programs into his personal accounts. But Isabella's most shocking discovery came when she decided to investigate Veronica Sterling herself. Using techniques she had learned from a cybersecurity expert she had dated briefly before meeting Alexander, Isabella accessed Veronica's social media accounts, employment records, and background information. What she found made everything click into place. Veronica Sterling didn't exist. The woman Alexander was planning to leave her for, the woman he had given $50 million to, the woman he claimed to love, her real name was Vanessa Rodriguez, and she had a criminal record spanning 3 states: identity theft in California, fraud in Nevada, embezzlement in Texas. Vanessa Rodriguez was a professional con artist who specialized in targeting wealthy, lonely men. She had changed her appearance, created a fake background, and had been systematically working to destroy Isabella's marriage from the inside. The final piece of evidence Isabella found made her blood run cold. Hidden in Veronica's medical records that Vanessa had been careless enough to access from Alexander's personal computer was proof that she wasn't pregnant at all. The sonogram images she had been showing Alexander were stolen from the internet. The morning sickness, the prenatal appointments, the talk of their future together, all of it was fake. Isabella sat in Alexander's leather chair, surrounded by printouts and photographs, feeling a strange sense of calm descend over her. The betrayal still hurt, would always hurt, but now she had something more powerful than grief. She had ammunition. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed Marcus Chen, a name she hadn't seen in years. Marcus had been her study partner at Harvard Law before she switched to architecture. He was also the only man she had ever loved before Alexander, and the one she had given up to marry into wealth and society. Isabella. Marcus's voice was warm but concerned. I hope you don't mind me calling. I saw the announcement about the gala tonight in the Times, and, well, I've been hearing some concerning rumors about your husband. Isabella felt tears spring to her eyes at the sound of a genuinely kind voice. Marcus, what kind of rumors? The kind that make me worry about you? Isabella, I know we haven't spoken in years, but I need to ask you directly, are you safe? Are you happy? The simple question broke something open inside her. Isabella found herself telling Marcus everything: the affair, the embezzlement, the fake pregnancy, the plans to take her child away from her. Marcus listened without interruption, his breathing the only sound on the other end of the line. Jesus, Isabella, he said finally, you need to get out of there. Today. Right now. I can't, Isabella said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. I'm not running. Marcus, I'm fighting. What do you mean? Alexander is planning to humiliate me at the gala tonight. He's going to introduce his mistress to society while I sit at home like a discarded wife. But he's made one crucial mistake. What's that? He doesn't know who he's really married to. Isabella explained her plan to Marcus, who listened with growing amazement. By the time she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Isabella, he said finally, what you're proposing, it's brilliant. It's also incredibly dangerous. Alexander Blackstone is one of the most powerful men in New York. If this backfires, then I'll lose everything, Isabella finished. But Marcus, I've already lost everything. The man I loved never existed. The marriage I treasured was a lie. The only thing I have left to lose is my self-respect, and I'm not giving them that too. What do you need from me? Legal backup, media contacts, and a friend. You have all three, always. As Isabella hung up the phone, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not hope for reconciliation or forgiveness, but hope for justice. Hope for truth. Hope for a future where her child would grow up knowing that their mother had been strong enough to fight for what was right. She looked at the clock on Alexander's desk. 3 p.m. The gala started at 7. She had 4 hours to prepare for the most important performance of her life. Isabella Romano Blackstone was about to remind New York society that behind every successful man's betrayal stood a woman smart enough to burn his empire to the ground. The war was just beginning. Isabella stood in front of her walk-in closet, studying her reflection in the three-way mirror. At 7 months pregnant, her body had changed dramatically from the slender architect Alexander had married. Her breasts were fuller, her hips wider, her belly pronounced and round. Alexander had stopped looking at her with desire months ago, and she had begun to see herself through his eyes as someone whose purpose was purely functional. Tonight, she would reclaim her power. She selected a black Chanel maternity dress she had bought but never worn, elegant, sophisticated, and perfectly tailored to highlight rather than hide her pregnancy. The message would be clear: she was proud of her condition, proud of the life growing inside her, proud to be exactly who she was. As she dressed, Isabella's phone buzzed with updates from Marcus. True to his word, he had spent the afternoon mobilizing resources. He had contacted 3 major news outlets, ensuring that the evening's events would be covered by more than just society photographers. He had also arranged for a team of FBI investigators to be present at the gala, ready to act on the evidence of embezzlement that Isabella had uncovered. Everything is in place, Marcus texted. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Isabella typed back quickly. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She moved to her jewelry box, selecting pieces carefully. The diamond necklace Alexander had given her for their first anniversary, the sapphire earrings from their engagement, the wedding ring that now felt like a weight around her finger. Each piece would tell part of the story: the woman who had been loved, cherished, and ultimately betrayed. As she applied her makeup, Isabella thought about the 3 USB drives hidden in her purse. Each contained copies of every piece of evidence she had gathered: the financial records, the messages, the proof of Veronica's real identity. One drive was for the FBI, one for the media, and one was her insurance policy. Her phone rang. Alexander's name appeared on the screen. Bella. His voice was honey smooth, loving, concerned. How are you feeling, sweetheart? I'm fine, Alex. Getting ready for tonight. There was a pause. Getting ready, Bella. We talked about this. You need to rest. The gala will be too much stress for you and the baby. Actually, I feel wonderful today. The best I've felt in months. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Isabella could hear the panic creeping into Alexander's voice. Bella, please, listen to me. This isn't a good idea. There will be photographers, loud music, crowds of people. It's not safe for someone in your condition. Someone in my condition. Isabella's voice remained perfectly calm. You mean someone who's pregnant with your child, someone who's carrying the future heir to the Blackstone Empire. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Do I, Alexander? I've been thinking a lot today about our relationship, about our future. I have some things I want to discuss with you tonight. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Alexander spoke again, his voice had lost all warmth. What kind of things? Oh, just some questions about our finances, our plans, our partnership. Nothing that can't wait until tonight. I'll see you at the gala. Darling. Isabella hung up before he could respond. She knew that Alexander was probably calling Veronica right now, warning her that Isabella might be coming to the gala. She could imagine their panicked conversation, their frantic attempts to adjust their plans. But it was too late. Isabella had already set the wheels in motion. At 6 p.m., Isabella's doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone, but when she checked the security monitor, she saw a familiar face, Maria Santos, her former assistant from her architecture firm. Maria had been more than an employee. She had been a friend, a confidant, someone who had encouraged Isabella to pursue her dreams even after she married Alexander. Maria, what are you doing here? Marcus called me, Maria said, stepping into the foyer. He told me what was happening. Isabella, I'm so sorry. I always suspected Alexander was, but I never imagined it was this bad. Maria handed Isabella a small device. It's a hidden camera and microphone. Marcus thought you might want to record whatever happens tonight for legal purposes. Isabella looked at the tiny device. No bigger than a button. Where did Marcus get this? Apparently, he has friends in interesting places. The camera is virtually undetectable, and the microphone will pick up conversations from 50 feet away. Everything will be stored on a secure server that can't be hacked or destroyed. As Maria helped Isabella conceal the device in her dress, she spoke quietly. Isabella, I need you to know something. After you left the firm to get married, Alexander came to see me. He offered me money to report back to him about your activities, your friendships, your conversations. He wanted to know if you were talking to any other men, if you seemed unhappy, if you were planning anything he should know about. Isabella's blood ran cold. Did you take the money? I told him to go to hell, Maria said firmly. But Isabella, it means he's been watching you for years, controlling you in ways you probably don't even realize. The revelation shouldn't have surprised Isabella, but it did. Alexander's control had been so subtle, so gradual, that she had barely noticed it happening. The gentle suggestions that became firm requests, the friends who mysteriously stopped calling, the career opportunities that Alexander deemed inappropriate for a wife. Maria, Isabella said, I need you to do something for me tonight. Anything. If something happens to me, if I don't come home tonight, or if I disappear, or if anything seems suspicious, I need you to contact Detective Rodriguez at the NYPD. Tell him to look for the safe deposit box at Chase Manhattan. Box number 4472, everything is in there. Maria's eyes widened. Isabella, what are you planning? Justice, Isabella said simply. And freedom? At 6:30, Isabella's car arrived, not the Bentley that Alexander usually sent for her, but a simple black sedan that Marcus had arranged. As she rode through the snow-covered streets of Manhattan toward Lincoln Center, Isabella felt a strange sense of peace. For months, she had been living in a fog of confusion and hurt, trying to understand why her marriage was failing, why Alexander had become so distant, why she felt like a stranger in her own life. Now she understood that none of it had been her fault. She had been living with a predator who had systematically isolated her, controlled her, and planned to discard her. But predators made mistakes when they underestimated their prey. As the car pulled up to Lincoln Center, Isabella could see the red carpet already lined with photographers and news crews. The annual Blackstone Foundation Gala was one of New York's most prestigious events, attended by billionaires, celebrities, politicians, and royalty. Tonight, all of them would witness the truth. Isabella checked her reflection one final time in the car's mirror. She looked radiant, not despite her pregnancy, but because of it. She looked like exactly what she was, a strong woman, ready to fight for her future and her child's future. Mrs. Blackstone, the driver asked, are you ready? Isabella placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her. We're ready, she said, As she stepped out of the car and onto the red carpet, camera flashes immediately began popping. Isabella smiled and waved, looking for all the world like the perfect billionaire's wife attending another glamorous event. No one in the crowd of photographers and reporters could have imagined that they were about to witness the most explosive scandal in New York society history. Isabella walked through the entrance of Lincoln Center with her head held high, ready to take back everything that had been stolen from her. The reckoning had begun. Lincoln Center's David H. Koch Theater had been transformed into a glittering palace for the evening. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in white silk, each centerpiece a masterpiece of white orchids and baby's breath. 500 of New York's most influential people mingled in evening wear that collectively cost more than most people's homes. Isabella arrived fashionably late, just as Alexander was beginning his opening remarks from the podium. She could see him clearly from the back of the theater, impeccable in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his dark hair gleaming under the stage lights, his voice carrying that commanding authority that had first attracted her to him 5 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexander's voice boomed through the sound system. Welcome to the 10th Annual Blackstone Foundation Gala. Tonight, we gather not just to celebrate our achievements, but to commit to an even brighter future for the children and families who depend on our foundation's work. Isabella spotted Veronica immediately, seated at the head table in a stunning red Valentino gown. Her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo, her belly artificially rounded beneath the flowing fabric. She was playing her part perfectly, the beautiful, pregnant mistress, soon to be revealed as the new Mrs. Blackstone. As Alexander continued his speech about charitable giving and family values, Isabella made her way through the crowd. Heads turned as she passed. She had been absent from society events for months, and her presence tonight was unexpected. She heard whispered conversations following in her wake. "Is that Isabella Blackstone? I thought she was on bed rest. She looks radiant, doesn't she? I heard there were problems in the marriage." Isabella took a seat at an empty table near the back, her heart pounding but her expression serene. She watched Alexander's face as he finally noticed her presence. Even from across the massive theater, she could see the exact moment his eyes found her. His confident smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. But Isabella had seen enough poker games with her father to recognize a tell when she saw one. Alexander rushed through the remainder of his opening remarks, his usual polish slightly diminished by the knowledge that his pregnant wife, the woman he had told to stay home, was watching him from the audience. When he finished to polite applause, Isabella watched him lean down to whisper something urgent in Veronica's ear. Veronica's head whipped around, scanning the crowd until her eyes locked with Isabella's. Even from this distance, Isabella could see the flash of panic, quickly masked by defiance. Veronica leaned back toward Alexander, her lips moving rapidly in what was clearly an agitated conversation. Isabella smiled and raised her water glass in a small toast. Let them worry. The first course was served seared foie gras with champagne reduction, while a string quartet played Vivaldi in the background. Isabella ate mechanically, her mind focused on the USB drive hidden in her clutch and the hidden camera recording every moment. Around her, New York's elite discussed stock portfolios and vacation homes, blissfully unaware that their evening was about to take a dramatic turn. During the soup course, Alexander excused himself from the head table and made his way toward Isabella. She watched him approach, noting how he had composed himself back into the charming, concerned husband role he played so well in public. "Bella," he said, bending to kiss her cheek as camera flashes popped from the society photographers stationed around the room. "You look beautiful tonight. But sweetheart, what are you doing here? We agreed you should rest." Isabella looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Oh, Alex, I felt so much better today. And I couldn't bear to miss your big night. Besides," she placed her hand on her belly, "I wanted our baby to be here for Daddy's important speech." Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. Well, I'm glad you're feeling up to it, though perhaps you should leave after dinner. The program runs quite late, and actually, Isabella interrupted smoothly. I was hoping I could say a few words tonight about the Foundation's work with children. From the perspective of an expectant mother, I'm sure our guest would love to hear about our hopes for the future of our family. The blood drained from Alexander's face. Bella, that's not. The program is already set. There's no time for additional speakers. Oh, I'm sure we can make time, Isabella said brightly. After all, who better to speak about children's charities than someone who's about to become a mother herself? She could see Alexander's mind racing, trying to find a way to refuse without causing a scene. Around them, other guests were beginning to take notice of their conversation. We'll discuss it later, he said finally, his smile strained. Enjoy your dinner, darling. As Alexander returned to his table, Isabella saw him stop to speak with several men in dark suits stationed around the perimeter of the room. Security, she realized. He was making sure they were aware of her presence, probably instructing them to escort her out if she caused any problems. The irony was delicious. Alexander thought he was protecting his carefully orchestrated evening from his unstable, emotional wife. He had no idea that he was actually facilitating his own downfall. The main course arrived Wagyu beef with truffle sauce accompanied by speeches from various foundation board members and beneficiaries. Isabella listened with half her attention while mentally rehearsing her own speech. She had memorized every damning detail, every piece of evidence, every devastating revelation. As dessert was being served, Alexander stood to deliver his closing remarks. This was traditionally the emotional highlight of the evening, where he would speak passionately about the Foundation's mission and announce the year's fundraising total. Friends, Alexander began, his voice warm and resonant. Tonight we have raised over $50 million for children in need. These funds will build hospitals, create scholarships, and provide hope for thousands of families across our great nation. The irony was staggering. Alexander was celebrating raising $50 million for charity while having stolen twice that amount for his own purposes. Isabella felt her baby kick strongly, as if responding to her rising indignation. But beyond the money, Alexander continued, tonight represents something deeper. It represents the power of love, of family, of building something greater than ourselves. Speaking of family, Isabella's blood turned to ice as she realized what was coming. I have a very special announcement to make tonight. Many of you know that my wife Isabella and I are expecting our first child. What you don't know is that we've recently learned we're actually expecting twins. The lie was so bold, so unexpected, that Isabella gasped audibly. Around the room, guests erupted in delighted applause and congratulations. Several people turned to beam at Isabella, who sat frozen in shock. Alexander wasn't finished. And I'm thrilled to share that Isabella and I have decided to expand our family in another way as well. We're pleased to introduce you to someone very special, Veronica Sterling, who will be joining our family through adoption proceedings we've been quietly arranging. The applause continued as Alexander gestured toward Veronica, who stood gracefully and placed her hand on her fake belly. The implication was clear to everyone in the room. The Blackstones were not only having twins, they were also adopting another pregnant woman's child out of the goodness of their hearts. Isabella realized with crystalline clarity that she was witnessing a master manipulator at work. In one brilliant stroke, Alexander had explained away Veronica's pregnancy, made himself look magnanimous and family-oriented, and created a narrative that would make any accusations from Isabella look like the jealous rantings of a mentally unstable wife. It was time to destroy him. Isabella stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor in the sudden quiet that followed Alexander's announcement. All eyes in the room turned toward her as she began walking toward the stage, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Actually, Isabella said, her voice carrying clearly through the theater's excellent acoustics, I think there are a few things about our family that need clarification. Alexander's face went white as Isabella climbed the steps to the stage. The room buzzed with confusion and anticipation. This was not part of the program, but no one was going to stop a pregnant woman from speaking at a charity gala. Isabella reached the podium and gently moved Alexander aside. He was trapped. Any attempt to physically remove her would look abusive and create an even bigger scandal. Good evening, Isabella said into the microphone, her voice steady and strong. For those who don't know me, I'm Isabella Romano Blackstone, and yes, I am expecting my first child with Alexander. She paused, letting her hand rest visibly on her belly, making sure every camera in the room captured the image of the glowing pregnant wife. However, I need to correct my husband's announcement. We are not expecting twins. I am carrying one child, conceived 8 months ago during what I believed was a loving marriage. The confusion in the room was palpable. Where was this going? I also need to address the adoption story my husband just shared with you. The truth is, Veronica Sterling is not a pregnant woman we're helping through adoption. She is my husband's mistress, and she has been having an affair with him for over a year. The collective gasp from 500 people was audible. Camera flashes began popping frantically as reporters realized they were witnessing a bombshell scandal unfold in real time. Furthermore, Isabella continued, her voice growing stronger, the pregnancy Veronica is displaying tonight is completely fake. She is not pregnant at all. She is wearing a prosthetic belly as part of an elaborate deception. Isabella reached into her clutch and pulled out the USB drive. I have documented evidence of their affair, including thousands of text messages. Financial records showing Alexander has given her over $50 million of foundation money, and proof that Veronica Sterling is actually Vanessa Rodriguez, a convicted con artist with a history of fraud across multiple states. The theater erupted in chaos. Reporters were shouting questions. Guests were turning to each other in shock. And Isabella could see Alexander's security team moving toward the stage. But Isabella wasn't finished. The most devastating betrayal, she said, her voice cutting through the noise, is that my pregnancy was planned by my husband not out of love, but as a distraction. According to their private communications, getting me pregnant was a strategy to keep me fat and emotional, while they planned to steal our assets and leave me with nothing. She looked directly at Alexander, who stood frozen beside her, his carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. Alexander planned to take our child away from me by claiming I was an unfit mother. They documented my pregnancy symptoms, my emotional responses to his cruelty, as evidence of mental instability. Their goal was to leave me with no money, no child, and no recourse. Isabella turned back to the audience, many of whom were now standing, some recording with their phones, others calling out questions and encouragement. But they made one crucial mistake, Isabella said, her voice ringing with triumph. They assumed I was the same naive woman Alexander married 5 years ago. They forgot that I graduated summa cum laude from Harvard, that I built a successful architecture firm before giving it up for love, and that I have never backed down from a fight when someone threatened my family. At that moment, as if summoned by Isabella's words, FBI agents began entering the theater from multiple entrances. Isabella saw Marcus Chen near the back of the room, speaking with the lead agent and pointing toward the stage. The evidence I've gathered over the past week has been turned over to federal authorities. Alexander Blackstone will be arrested tonight for embezzlement, tax evasion, and fraud. The $50 million he stole from children's charities will be recovered and returned to its rightful purpose. Alexander finally found his voice. Isabella, stop this. You're having a breakdown. The pregnancy has made you unstable. You need help. It was exactly the wrong thing to say. The entire room could see a calm, articulate, obviously pregnant woman standing next to a panicking man who was trying to gaslight her in front of hundreds of witnesses. Isabella smiled at her husband with something that might have been pity. The only help I needed, Alexander, was the help to see you clearly. And now everyone else can see you too. At that moment, Veronica made her critical error. Unable to bear the scrutiny any longer, she stood abruptly from her table and began rushing toward the exit. But in her haste and panic, she tripped over her own feet. The fake pregnancy belly went flying across the floor of Lincoln Center, landing with a hollow thud in front of the head table. The theater fell into stunned silence for exactly 3 seconds. Then the chaos truly began. Reporters surged forward. Cameras flashed like lightning. Guests shouted questions and exclamations. And through it all, Isabella stood calmly at the podium, one hand on her real, growing belly, watching as federal agents approached her husband with handcuffs. "Alexander Blackstone," the lead agent said clearly, "you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." As Alexander was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Isabella with an expression of pure hatred. But Isabella felt nothing but relief. The man she had loved was gone, had probably never existed at all. What remained was just a criminal facing justice. Veronica, meanwhile, was being questioned by other agents near the fallen prosthetic belly. Her elegant composure had completely shattered, and she was sobbing hysterically while trying to explain away the obvious deception. Isabella stepped back to the microphone one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting your evening, but I hope you understand that when someone threatens your child, you do whatever it takes to protect them. Thank you for your attention, and please continue to support legitimate children's charities in the future." The standing ovation that followed lasted for nearly 10 minutes. As Isabella finally left the stage, she was surrounded by well-wishers, reporters, and supporters. But the person she was most happy to see was Marcus Chen, who emerged from the crowd with tears in his eyes. "Isabella," he said, "that was the most courageous thing I've ever witnessed." Isabella smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in years. "It was the most honest thing I've done in a long time." As they walked toward the exit together, Isabella could see the headlines already forming in her mind. "Pregnant wife exposes billionaire's affair on stage. Mistress flees in public shame." But those headlines would only tell part of the story. The real story was about a woman who had found her strength, protected her child, and refused to be a victim. The real story was about Isabella Romano Blackstone's rebirth. 6 months later, Isabella sat in the nursery of her new brownstone on the Upper East Side, gently rocking her 3-month-old son, Ethan Marcus Romano. The morning sun streamed through windows that looked out onto a small garden where she planned to teach him to walk someday. The contrast with her old life was striking. Gone was the cold marble and crystal of the penthouse, replaced by warm hardwood floors, soft fabrics, and furniture chosen for comfort rather than status. The nursery walls were painted a soothing sage green, decorated with prints of famous architectural landmarks from around the world, a subtle nod to the career she was slowly returning to. Baby Ethan stirred in her arms, his dark hair catching the sunlight. He had Alexander's coloring, but Isabella's eyes alert, intelligent, and full of curiosity about the world around him. Isabella had worried during her pregnancy about how she would feel looking at her child and seeing traces of the man who had betrayed her so completely. Instead, she found that Ethan looked entirely like himself, a new person with unlimited potential, unmarked by his father's sins. The legal proceedings had moved swiftly once Isabella's evidence was presented. Alexander was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for embezzlement, tax evasion, and fraud. The judge had been particularly harsh in his sentencing remarks, noting that Alexander had betrayed not only his wife and family, but thousands of vulnerable children who depended on his foundation's work. Veronica, whose real name, as Isabella had discovered, was indeed Vanessa Rodriguez, received 5 years for conspiracy and fraud. She was also ordered to pay restitution, though since she had already spent most of the money Alexander had given her on luxury goods and gambling, there was little to recover. But justice, Isabella had learned, was about more than punishment. It was about restoration, about rebuilding what had been torn down. The Blackstone Foundation had been restructured under new management, with Isabella serving as an advisory board member. The stolen funds had been recovered and were already at work building the pediatric cancer wing at Mount Sinai Hospital that Alexander had promised but never intended to deliver. More personally, Isabella had used her settlement from the divorce to establish the Phoenix Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women escape financially abusive relationships. The foundation provided legal assistance, financial planning services, and emergency housing for women and children fleeing domestic abuse. "You're thinking about work again, aren't you?" Marcus said softly from the doorway. Isabella looked up at him with a smile. Marcus had been her anchor through the chaos of the past year, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, but always present when she needed support. Their relationship had resumed slowly, built this time on mutual respect and shared values, rather than the passionate intensity of their youth. Guilty, Isabella admitted. We got 3 new cases this week. A woman whose husband had been hiding assets in offshore accounts, another whose partner had destroyed her credit, and a teenager whose boyfriend convinced her to take out credit cards in her name for his business ventures. Marcus came into the room and sat on the rocking chair beside Isabella's. At 36, he had grown into his role as one of New York's most respected civil rights attorneys. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his kind eyes were framed by laugh lines that hadn't been there when they were young. The teenager case sounds familiar, he said. Wasn't that how Veronica got started? Almost exactly. It's a common pattern. Financial predators target young, trusting people and use their emotions against them. The Phoenix Foundation's Teenage Outreach Program is designed to teach young people how to recognize and avoid these situations. Isabella shifted Ethan to her other arm and looked around the peaceful nursery. Sometimes I think about how different things could have been if I hadn't found those messages, if I'd kept trusting Alexander, if I'd been too scared to fight back. But you did fight back, Marcus said firmly. Isabella, you saved yourself and your son. More than that, you've saved hundreds of other women through your work. The ripple effects of what you did that night at Lincoln Center are still spreading. It was true. Isabella's story had been covered extensively in the media, not just as a society scandal, but as an inspirational tale of empowerment. She had been featured on the cover of Time magazine as one of their People Who Changed the World, and her memoir, Breaking Free: A Mother's Fight for Justice, had spent 20 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. But the recognition that meant the most to Isabella came from the women who wrote to her, daily women who had found the courage to leave abusive relationships, to investigate suspicious financial activity, to trust their instincts when something felt wrong. There's something I want to show you, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. It came through the Foundation's website this morning. He handed Isabella the phone, which displayed an email from a woman named Sarah in Ohio. Dear Mrs. Romano, I watched your story on the news last year and it saved my life. I was married to a man who controlled every penny of our money, who told me I was too stupid to understand finances, who made me ask permission to buy groceries. After seeing your interview, I started paying attention to our bank statements. I discovered he had a secret credit card with $50,000 in debt and was having an affair with a woman he was supporting financially. I contacted the Phoenix Foundation's legal helpline, and they connected me with a lawyer who helped me file for divorce and protect my assets. I'm now living on my own with my 2 children, working as a nurse, and for the first time in 10 years, I feel like myself again. Thank you for showing me that I could be strong enough to fight for my future. Isabella felt tears spring to her eyes as she finished reading. This was why she had chosen to make her story public despite the painful exposure. This was why she worked 16-hour days building the foundation while caring for a newborn. Sarah's story isn't unique, Marcus said gently. We get emails like this every week. Isabella, you've created something that will outlast any of us. You've turned your worst experience into a force for good. Ethan began to fuss, and Isabella instinctively began the gentle swaying motion that always calmed him. As she looked down at her son, she thought about the future she was building for him, a future where his mother was known not as a victim, but as a fighter. I want him to be proud of me, Isabella said softly. Not just proud of what I accomplished, but proud of how I handled the worst moment of my life. He will be, Marcus assured her. But Isabella, you should be proud of yourself too. You didn't just survive, you transformed everything around you. That afternoon, Isabella received a call that brought news she had been both expecting and dreading. Alexander had been granted a supervised phone call to request a conversation with her. It would be the first time they had spoken since the night of his arrest. Isabella agreed to the call, curious about what he might say after 18 months in prison. When Alexander's voice came through the phone, Isabella was shocked by how different he sounded. Gone was the commanding authority, the smooth confidence that had once attracted her. He sounded older, tired, defeated. "Isabella," he said quietly, "I know I have no right to call you. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But I need you to know that I understand now what I lost." Isabella remained silent, letting him continue. "I've had a lot of time to think about what I did to you, to our family, to all those children who depended on the foundation. I can't undo any of it, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, not because I'm in prison, but because I hurt the best person I've ever known." "Alexander," Isabella said finally, "what do you want from me?" "I want to know about our son. I want to know if he's healthy, if he's happy, if he looks like you. I want to know if there's any chance, any possibility that someday, when I get out, I might be able to be part of his life." Isabella looked across the room at Ethan, who was napping peacefully in his crib, completely unaware of the conversation taking place about his future. "Our son's name is Ethan Marcus Romano," Isabella said. "He's healthy, he's beautiful, and he will grow up knowing the truth about his father. When he's old enough to make his own decisions, if he wants to have a relationship with you, I won't stand in his way. But Alexander, you will never be his father. A father is someone who protects his family, who sacrifices for them, who puts their needs above his own desires. You chose to be a sperm donor. Marcus chose to be a father." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. "Is Marcus, are you and he—" "That's not your concern anymore," Isabella said firmly. "Your concern should be becoming the kind of man who deserves forgiveness. Not just from me or from Ethan, but from yourself." After the call ended, Isabella sat quietly in her living room, processing the conversation. She felt no satisfaction in Alexander's obvious suffering, but she also felt no inclination to offer him comfort. Some bridges, once burned, were meant to stay that way. That evening, Marcus came over for dinner, a routine they had established in the months since Ethan's birth. As they cooked together in Isabella's warm, inviting kitchen, she told him about Alexander's call. "How do you feel about it?" Marcus asked, chopping vegetables while Isabella tended to the sauce. "Neutral," Isabella said, surprised by her own answer. "I don't hate him anymore. Marcus, I don't love him. I don't forgive him. But I don't hate him either. He's just irrelevant to my life now." "That's probably the healthiest response possible," Marcus observed. "And what about Ethan? How do you plan to handle that situation as he gets older?" Isabella had been thinking about this question for months. "I'll tell him the truth, in age-appropriate ways, that his biological father made serious mistakes that hurt a lot of people, including us. That sometimes people we love disappoint us, but that doesn't define our worth or our future. And that the men and women who choose to love and support us like you are often more important than the ones who share our DNA." Marcus stopped chopping and looked at her with an expression of deep love and admiration. "Isabella, there's something I want to ask you." He set down his knife and turned to face her fully. Isabella felt her heart rate increase as she recognized the seriousness in his tone. "These past 18 months, watching you rebuild your life, watching you create something beautiful from something terrible, watching you be an incredible mother, it's been an honor to be part of your journey. And I find myself hoping that I can be part of all your journeys going forward." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Isabella's eyes widened as he dropped to one knee in her kitchen, surrounded by the sense of their home-cooked meal and the sounds of baby Ethan cooing in his bouncer nearby. "Isabella Romano, will you marry me? Not because you need me, not because you need anyone, but because we choose each other, because we want to build something together based on respect, equality, and love." Isabella looked down at the ring, a simple, elegant sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. Nothing like the ostentatious engagement ring Alexander had given her. This ring was beautiful because it was chosen specifically for her, because it represented a love based on knowing her completely and choosing her anyway. Yes, Isabella said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Marcus, I want to choose you too. As Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, Isabella felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with marriage or men or external validation. She felt complete because she had fought for herself, had protected her child, had built something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. 1 year later, Isabella and Marcus were married in a small ceremony in the garden behind her brownstone. Ethan, now walking and chattering constantly, served as ring bearer with help from Isabella's sister. The guest list was small close friends, family, and several women whose lives had been changed by the Phoenix Foundation's work. As Isabella walked down an aisle lined with the roses she had planted herself, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The woman who had married Alexander Blackstone 5 years earlier had been seeking security, status, and the validation that came from being chosen by a powerful man. The woman marrying Marcus Chen today needed none of those things. She had built her own security, created her own status, and found validation in her own accomplishments. She was choosing Marcus not from neediness or fear, but from strength and love. In her wedding vows, Isabella spoke about second chances, about the difference between settling and choosing, about building a partnership based on mutual respect rather than power dynamics. Marcus, she said, you saw me at my strongest and my most vulnerable, and you loved both versions. You supported my dreams without trying to control them. You stepped into our lives not as a rescuer, but as an equal partner. I choose you not because I need you, but because I want to build something beautiful with you. In the years that followed, Isabella's story continued to inspire women around the world. The Phoenix Foundation expanded internationally, providing resources and support to women in dozens of countries. Isabella returned to architecture part-time, designing affordable housing projects and safe shelters for domestic violence survivors. She and Marcus had 2 more children together, a daughter named Hope and another son named Justice. Ethan grew up knowing the truth about his origins, but surrounded by so much love and support that his biological father's absence never defined him. Alexander was released from prison after serving 12 years. He attempted to contact Isabella several times, but she never responded. She had meant what she told him he was irrelevant to her life. Veronica disappeared entirely after her release, and Isabella never gave her another thought. On Ethan's 10th birthday, as Isabella watched him blow out candles surrounded by his siblings, his stepfather who had adopted him, and the family they had built together, she reflected on the choice she had made that night at Lincoln Center. She could have stayed silent, could have accepted Alexander's narrative, could have tried to hold on to the life she thought she wanted. Instead, she had chosen truth, justice, and the unknown future that lay beyond them. It had been the best decision of her life. As the evening wound down and the children were tucked into bed, Isabella and Marcus sat on their back porch, watching the stars appear over Manhattan. Isabella's phone buzzed with a message from a woman in Sweden who had just left an abusive marriage after reading Isabella's book. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had made different choices that night? Marcus asked. Isabella considered the question seriously. Sometimes, but then I look at our life, at our children, at the work we're doing, and I realize that everything terrible that happened to me led to everything wonderful I have now. I wouldn't change any of it. She leaned back against Marcus's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of a man who had chosen to love her, not despite her strength, but because of it. Besides, Isabella added with a smile, Alexander Blackstone thought he was getting rid of a problem when he betrayed me. Instead, he created his own worst nightmare, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. And as the lights of New York twinkled below them, Isabella Romano Chen knew that their story was still being written, one choice at a time.